When tackling history from a Western stance, we find the images available during early art movements such as the Classical, Renaissance, or Baroque eras were often paintings. Very commonly, there was a hierarchy to these paintings even. Landscapes were often considered lowbrow art, while paintings portraying people, religious icons, and the sublime were considered highbrow. Of course, the kind of people that owned the art varied, ranging from private collectors to the church, but commonly, the fine arts were only something the very wealthy could own at the time. Because of this emphasis on the subject being portrayed, paintings tend to quote-unquote make grandiose, as Sontag puts it. For this reason, there was less room for comedy as a concept in painting and illustration. Images in this form held reverence, honored someone or something, had depictions of the holy, enlightenment, and were subject to fine academic scrutiny. There was a need to portray things in their most natural form, and marginal room for error, since these paintings would not only be expensive but time-consuming. That is, until print and photography rolled around. As we move through history, we see the effects of print and photography shifting and democratizing images, making them widely accessible to the public. Illustrations could be reproduced, so they no longer were something purely accessible to the wealthy, with techniques such as lithography, aquatint, and so forth. Less effort was put into the making of the images since they could easily be reproduced. The possibility of owning a physical illustration by someone like Goya seemed much more likely, albeit, of course, still being a copy. With Goya in particular, we see the first sort of emergence in the fine arts being used for satire due to the ability to print, in this case, for political commentary. And with emerging technology like photography, it seems like just about anyone could have their own portrait taken. No need to hire a painter or sit for several days for it to develop. Images were beginning to feel less and less exclusive. To reference Sontag, who used Melville's Pierre to express uniqueness being lost in having the subject captured, when everyone has his portrait published, true distinction lies in not having yours published at all. Thus, with this multiplicity of images for the general public, we start to come up with other uses for this, which is humor and entertainment. As the democratization of images becomes more common through press and print, we see it be developed for things like entertainment and humor for the general public. Granted, comic artists usually create both image and text, where memes adapt pre-existing visuals with new text. Some might consider this stealing, but Abate points out that cartoonists like Charles Schulz have long used stencil templates to replicate images, a practice that is also used effectively in, say, dinosaur comics, and meme humor depends on people connecting to the image rather than its origin. In fact, the New Yorker's highly popular cartoon caption contest, in which the magazine prints a single-panel drawing with no speech balloons or dialogue boxes, asks the reader to supply their own verbal jokes, is basically a meme generator. According to Abate, it is, quote-unquote, seen more as a highbrow thing, crowdsourcing everyone's wit, but the magazine supplies the template image and then everyone puts their own text or captions. They're making memes. If only they published the winner, folks would be disappointed because the fun is seeing all the clever, funny things that people come up with. In addition to this, Scott McCloud is widely considered the leading theorist when it comes to the art of comics, and his hugely influential 2000s book, Reinventing Comics, The Evolution of Art Form, explores the boundless potential for digital comics, freed from the constraints of a printed page. He calls this aspect the infinite canvas because cartoonists can now create works of any size or shape, even as tall as a mountain. Memes have endless possibilities of a different kind, per Abate.
With the rise of the internet, social media has become the dominating third space we use in our everyday lives, providing us these interactive spaces in the wake of these new technologies being created. As the media landscape condenses our interactions through the various interfaces we use, digitizing our reality, it paves the way in how we connect with the world around us through our screens. Of which this way of communication has greatly impacted, changed, and evolved over the years with the internet's continued and growing significance in society and our culture, becoming hyper, blurring the lines of our perceptions and understanding of media through the perspective lens of our screens. This cyberspace allows us to have a convenient access to this world of interaction for our devices and share information through photos and videos, digitizing them, bringing forth a new way of interacting and communication that combines visual elements with info and cultural markers within pop culture to engage with other people online in the shared space of whatever social platforms they're engaging in. Memes today in this contemporary time have greatly evolved from its initial idea and concept in ecology, and the idea that memes are a pattern, of which from the initial idea was the means of imitation, of which then you get the pattern. And though Richard Dawkins meant this more in the study of genetics of human evolution, I don't think he would have ever believed that this framework would be the basis of modern day internet culture. Though I guess one could argue and try to place this in the evolution of human communication, but that's besides the point. The point is that memes follow this idea that was initially established, but applied in this postmodernist context.
As we know, memes are often known for their relatability. For this, they tend to flatten and condense an experience, and often this comes at the cost of removing a lot of context from the subject that is being portrayed. Sometimes it may lead the viewer substituting real experiences with this flattened form of reality, often leading to misinterpretations of the original context. With the proliferation of images being accessed and spread at an increasingly fast rate, it can lead to larger communities being formed around certain niches, but also miscommunications and divides between them as well.
Memes in today's modern world and context are essentially the digitization of what photographs have come to mean to us in its analog form, now translating the experiences of reality on the web, no different to the condensing, decommodification, and reproduction of photography, reaching a much larger and broader audience of people through the internet, trends in turn becoming a lot more visible online due to viral popularity, the more they are seen and therefore becoming more greatly known in the process. Memes are established by the current dominating forces in pop culture, of which then they are referenced over and over again, that it becomes the norm with the subsect of whatever community it originated from. That can, in turn, break out from its niche and become more socially acceptable due to its stronghold on the culture. In ways, memes mimic the copying nature of photography in terms of its production, or in this case, the reproduction, the copy and pasting of images when applied in the digital world. Its digitization allows for mass copying and pasting, giving the greater populace, the common man, a simple power. As Susan Song talks about in her essay The Image World, when images that have extraordinary powers determine our demands upon reality, and when themselves coveted substitutes for first-hand experience.
In some cases, memes can be collaborative and built upon so much that the original context has been altered or the icons have been reinterpreted in some kind of way. For example, behold the Ship of Theseus, where layered texts of different fonts and images are so far beyond the original context that the format itself becomes the punchline in a very meta sense. In this sort of aspect, we can see the collage-like nature that memes can take on as well. In addition to this, appropriation art seems to lend some of its ideas to the function of memes, perhaps unintentionally. Within works like Andy Warhol, who often appropriates images, or his pop art, we can find some similarities. Usually Warhol's art tends to be a reflection on consumerist culture by appropriating media that we would find within pop culture and replicating it in bulk. Though memes serve a different purpose, usually the main one being humor, there is a level of this that is functionally the same, like using copies of an image from pop culture and repurposing it without credit. Many people that utilize memes are not interested in its origin because that is simply not the point. Authorship doesn't tend to be a prioritization for people that use memes. There is some kind of cultural value that is automatically understood by the image, which tends to do a lot of the heavy lifting for how people read it. In Warhol's case, it can be an image of Marilyn Monroe or Elvis, its duplicity making it more redundant. Perhaps it is partly because of this reason that the life cycle of memes tends to be short-lived, quickly being outdated as people try to seek out new ways to express themselves.
With technology growing at such an accelerating pace, so too does the language and culture beyond the screen grow alongside our abilities and understanding of our own reality, being reflected back on these complex systems of databases changing with the times as the new becomes the old as soon as it comes out. It should be no surprise that memes follow that same logic, for they can become completely out of date depending on the trajectory of trends, being a meme's lifeline. Their existence is circumstantial and solely dependent on the community to keep it relevant to stay culturally significant. To meme is to be associated by it, to relate to what it says and what it means. So in turn, memes are as important to what we the viewers make them out to be. Memes as a new media creates this social dimension, amplifying social culture, social identity. For as one meaning suggests by Lev, new media is the projection of the anthology of the computer onto the culture itself.
Functionally, we also know that memes can often reaffirm certain ideas that contribute to the oversimplification of experiences. For example, a popular meme within the anime fandom would be the Megami Meet Potential Man meme from the franchise Jujutsu Kaisen. Usually, this image format is reproduced for anime slander, replacing the character in question with characters that fit the premise of doesn't meet their true potential. Through this collective reformatting and referencing of the template, a kind of affirmation of the original context is solidified, even if it's a broad generalization of said character. On the topic of slander and repetition, we can circle back to this image of Mona Lisa titled LHOOQ by Dada artist Marcel Duchamp. Dada is often defined as an anti-art art movement, ironically enough, to critique the traditional institutional practice of the fine arts around the early 1910s to the 1920s. Duchamp, in this case, takes a reproduction of the Mona Lisa, a postcard, and adds his own slander and text, dare I say caption. Albeit, one more graciously being a critique of the institution, while the other is something less substantial. Regardless, Duchamp's sentiments, or perhaps the slander portion, wouldn't be uncommon to hear amongst people now when it comes to the Mona Lisa. But it seems more of an after effect of the many ways we can virtually experience images through their seemingly infinite reproduction, thus perhaps watering down the experience of seeing Mona Lisa with your own eyes. But this is just one of many ways that we continue to take images less and less seriously nowadays. Whilst memes takes its similarities from previous uses of images before it, memes also have an impact on art within fandom. Within fandom, we can see communities continue to reuse and repurpose meme images to insert their own interpretations of the work by redrawing their chosen subjects, similarly to how people would collage images using meme templates. In this case, however, there is an aspect of original media being inserted, allowing for different artistic interpretations of the original image. Though not considered fine art, trends like this within fandom tend to resonate with more people to build community, which is exactly why the relatability of memes works to create these links. All in all, there's a lot of ways images from the past influence memes and vice versa. They all continue to add to the ever-growing vocabulary that is our visual culture. And that's about all we can cover for that matter, so thanks for watching.